And now we will turn to the conference session number 1, which is entitled The Evolution of Creative Lighting to Reimagine Cities. Perhaps to start us off, I can, well, tell you a bit about how this session came to be imagined. In LUCI, we hear a lot about nightlife. We hear a lot about tourism, of course. And of course, creative lighting is a fantastic asset, but it's not all that simple. There is no such thing as really easy marketing. And when you're a city as a complex, or especially large cities as Sydney, London, or Lyon, there are many complex balances to find between light and shadows, public and private, cities and other levels of government, you know, between creating subtle shades of dynamic and colorful light. But also sometimes there's this anachronic wow effect. And also between the imperatives of creating urban spaces when you're a city and the need to change that towards better placemaking. How does everything fit together, really, in real life? What's the message that we want to share to our fellow citizens? And how we show and how citizens see our cities after dark is really not that trivial. It really sends a strong message. I think, as we heard also in the opening remarks, the world has changed definitely, not only due to COVID, but also this, well, landslide effect that started way back, you know, to wake us, I think, all up about the impacts of our lifestyles on this good old planet that we share. This applies to urban lighting in many ways, and of course to creative lighting. Our speakers will give us some insights, and we really hope to that it will kind of also help you to go into the right balances for your projects and cities. So we can now also let in Mr. Godinot and Mrs. Gaventa that have joined us. We have 3 very distinguished guests from 3 cities, from Lyon, from Sydney, from London. And well, I'd like to start with, of course, welcoming Sarah that has just joined us online. A note of importance here again, if you have any questions for our speakers, don't hesitate to use the chat on your right. And what we will do at the very end of this session, we will scoop up the questions that you have for either, well, Sarah or perhaps for Lyon, for Sylvain, and we'll have them in the Q&A session at the end. So immediately we can start with you for an introduction, Sylvain Godinot. You are the Deputy Mayor of Lyon in charge of ecological transition and heritage. And in this delegation, it also includes, of course, public lighting. You're here to introduce us in this session to the vision of the city of Lyon regarding light and creativity. Hello again, Sylvain. I can see you here, and well, the floor is yours for this this introduction. Thank you so much.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will tell a few words about what is inspiring the theme of creative light to us. It's a wonderful and wide-ranging theme to explore. It conveys the image of light as something that amazes us and astounds us, giving us fresh ideas by playing on our perceptions. So what do we exactly mean when we talk about creative light? The relationships to light in our cities underwent a profound shift when we stopped seeing it solely from a functional perspective, dedicated only to safety concerns or utilitarian considerations to support mobility needs. Light plays a part in transforming the atmosphere in our regions and help us conquer this space we call the night in a different way. Many cities around the world have understood the unique power of light, which also explains the growing interest in exchanging information on the subject via the discussion hosted by the LUCI network. Creative light finds expression in events lighting as much as it does in our daily lives. Even lighting is a source of amazement and astonishment, and sometimes it radically transforms our perception of places we are used to visiting. It employs endlessly rich registers, in a way borrowing the chords of music, and Sarah has been explaining it, and sometimes intimate, sometimes more symphonic. What's more, light is also often backed by a singular sound, a universe that takes us off to another world. Likewise, permanent lighting offers a different vision, playing on another register of atmospheres that tell the story of a city in a new way, giving it its unique nocturnal identity. But is this creative dynamic always a force for good in our cities? The creation was the first act of sabotage, according to the writer Émile Cioran. This terribly ironic vision of creation leads us to tackle creative light from other angles. This includes artistic design, which invites us to take a step back and think outside the box, so what we change our outlook. In the history of art, certain acts of creation were sometimes considered improper and contrary to established good taste. This artistic revolution are, it seems, a natural part of the evolution of art per se. Light should not escape this trend, and so move away from certain conventional visions. It has in itself qualities that it is impossible to deny. The immense virtue of being able to illuminate what we want to accentuate and live under cover of darkness what we do not necessarily want to see. This creative power is understood very early on by professionals in the dramatic art, theater, dance, and cinema. The act of staging is part of this act of creation that gives birth to our nocturnal landscapes. But it also has to be renewed to give our cities in a different vocabulary by daring to be a little adventurous and going beyond conventional codes. This creative urge is also sometimes confused by a narcissistic vision of the suggested project in everyone's eyes. Light's capacity to elevate was recognized very early on. But this showcasing only makes sense when undertaken as part of a collective project. This, unfortunately, is not always the case, especially when lights serves as an invitation to promote a commercial identity for its own sake. The same is sometimes true when a city wants people to consume by pushing the idea that there is a need to market our regions. The risk undeniably relates to the excessive treatment of light and its effects, leading to confusion in a way that landscape is interpreted. The regulations that it will presumably be necessary to impose at certain times is first and foremost an open invitation to think about the collective project. Dialogue is needed in our region to preserve our nocturnal landscape that is indispensable to the creative spirit. The strength of the argument around light in our region depends on this. In all likelihood, we also need to rethink the role of creative shadow in our cities. Shadow is a way of highlighting the ability of our region to preserve certain environments. We sometimes forget that the night too has its virtues, offering a different rhythm and inviting rest and calm without in any way being naive. And also, shadow can be scary. It also opens up the world of the unknown for us. Pierre Soulages, a French painter who is famous for exploring black and who created what it called outre noir or beyond black, said, if we know we don't know, if we pay attention to what we don't know, if we watch out for what appears to be unknown, then a discovery is possible. Thank you all, and sorry for this inconvenience.
Oh no, there's no real inconvenience. I think thank you very much. Many thanks for this. As you all know, Lyon incorporates 30 years of history in urban lighting, and I think there's indeed now this management of a transition to new approaches of urban lighting, while still encouraging and ensuring this creative freedom. And I really love this idea of creative shadows. That was really interesting. I have a quick question now. As I know, Sylvain, perhaps you have to leave us for a meeting. So perhaps a short answer. I know also perhaps our colleague Thierry Marsic is here for the Q&A at the end if needed. Sylvain, we met a few times already, but you are still a newly elected deputy mayor of Lyon. But I think you've lived in Lyon for a long time, 15 years perhaps. What is your general appreciation of the nightscape of Lyon and its meaning, perhaps the message that it sends for the citizens of Lyon, for the visitors from the world?
It's a wide question. Well, Lyon is famous for its light, and so that's a very important part of the city. I think everybody knows the Lumiere brothers and their invention of cinema. The December 8th, tomorrow evening, is going to be the Fête des Lumières start, and with a very important, I would say, religious vision with Marie, and the light as a thank for the, how would I say that, for Marie to be taking care of the city. So there's a mystic vision, I would say, and there's also a vision as a city as a whole, with all this light enhancing the main monuments and also the bridges, like in London, maybe not as well as in London, but also. So I think the landscape of Lyon in night is a bit different of what it is in the day, and that's also what the people from Lyon are appreciating, that you get a different feeling when you move around that city at night, and you discover almost a new city. I think it's a very important part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really true. Well, thank you for being here this morning, Sylvain. It's incredible, even with the slight technical issues. I think that we've already gained quite a lot of insights from what you say, and I also remember the link to Soulages and his really fantastic work. I would encourage everyone to have a look. Also with a great interplay of light and shadow. I think it symbolizes very well what our cities are looking for and where we are going. So what we will do is perhaps go right to the second speaker while we wait for the city of Lyon. And we have today the second speaker that was going to take the floor is the deputy mayor of Sydney, Jess Scully, and she is especially the deputy Lord Mayor of Sydney, as I said, and chair of the nightlife and creative sector for the city. And she has also, across her work as an editor, curator, and also as a counselor and a prominent politician, used creativity always to engage people. And because of the time difference, Jess Scully can't be with us live, but she joins us with a video message from Sydney. And I think, we all have a mental image of the Sydney Opera House, sales especially, with various beautiful lighting pieces. And when we prepared for this meeting with Jess Scully, we asked what the city of Sydney thoughts were regarding creative lighting. And especially when thinking about the nighttime economy and how light can really help produce this, unique identity for the city, for the residents and the visitors. So we'd like now to let you see what the message from Jess Scully joining us from Sydney.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, it's great to be joining you here from Sydney, Australia. It's wonderful to be a part of the Lyon Light Festival Forum. It's iconic, and I'm honoured to be a part of your event. Thank you to LUCI for inviting me to be a part of this, and thank you for the kind introduction, Sylvain, as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Sydney and about the role that light plays in our city. Sydney has the largest nighttime economy and the biggest number of visitors under normal circumstances, I should add, in Australia. And we are also home to the city's densest commercial and residential districts. Our nighttime economy under normal circumstances generates $3.64 billion a year in our local area. And I should note that the city of Sydney itself is quite a small central part of the city, but it is the economic, cultural and sort of social heart of our city. And then we have about 30 other smaller councils that ring our local government area. And within our small local government area, more than 4,600 businesses are engaged in the nighttime economy, and they employ more than 32,000 people. So nighttime and nightlife is a really important part of our economy, our ecology, and our culture in Sydney. Now, before the pandemic arrived in Australia in March, we also had other challenges to contend with when it comes to our nightlife. Some of you will probably have heard of the lockout laws. These were some very stringent, very heavy-handed, in my opinion, policy moves by the state level of government with the objective of reducing alcohol-fueled violence. They were in place for 6 years, and just 1 month before the lockdown, we were successful in having the lockouts repealed. Those laws were lifted in January 2020, and we undertook a number of planning changes within the city centre to allow businesses, shops and restaurants to trade late into the night and to encourage venues to put on more live music and performance. We were able to mobilise a huge number of the community to participate in that process, and people were really clear that they wanted to have a powerfully active and engaging and diverse nightlife. Of course, all of that was cut short this year because just as we were getting to open up at night time after 6 years of the lockouts, we were shut down by the lockdowns. And as you can see in this slide number 2, you can see the empty Queen Victoria building, one of our key shopping precincts in the city that was more or less deserted for several months this year. But if we look at the silver lining of this moment, we have the opportunity to rethink our city and to help it recover day and night. We want to give people what they asked for pre-pandemic, which, and I'll quote this, it's a city with diverse and exciting nighttime economy with events and activities for people of all ages and interests. They want a city that's safe. They don't want a city that shuts down to be safe as soon as the sun goes down. But we want to go beyond that aspiration, and we want to make our city a true 24-hour city, one that's underpinned by the state government's 24-hour economy strategy. And we are realising this through a more accessible, equitable and open city in a COVID-safe way. And that means reclaiming space in our city that was previously dedicated to traffic and turning it over to people for social, cultural and economic life in the city. One thing that I'm really excited about is that we are focusing on a creative-led recovery in Sydney. Our goal is to program and support live music and performance, comedy, theatre, a more active use of public space in the city so that you can have cultural life in a way that's COVID safe and spaced out, and that takes advantage of our incredible weather and the fact that we're about to go into summer. And so we can reclaim the city as a people-focused place. And I hope that that is one of the positive long-term effects, that we have an active nighttime and pedestrian-focused use of public space. I'll move on to the next slide here, and you can see that this is Harmony Park, one of our city venues that is beautifully lit, I think, here. And the city is also a member of the Global Cities After Dark program. It's something that we participate in every year. We host a Global Cities After Dark event. It's a design that's an event that's designed to bring together all the stakeholders in the nighttime economy space to harness their collective knowledge and to let them lead the way in terms of getting a nightlife that works. And I hope also that it teaches us how to have a more integrated nighttime experience in our city, so that you're not just catering to people going out to venues, but also people who might be using outdoor spaces for activity, for exercise, for recreation. Understanding that we need to use our city more effectively both day and night. We also need to think about safety differently. And we've been thinking about safety quite a lot recently in relation to physical distancing, but it's also about providing quality, engaging spaces for our diverse communities to interact in safely. And lighting, as you know, plays a really key part in that. I'll just ask for the next slide here. This is Luminous at Darling Square. This is a programmable artwork there in the background, but you can also see that lighting up the fountains there. These are actually children's play fountains, is a really important part of what we do. The New South Wales Public Spaces Charter defines quality public space as a concept that's just as important as its availability, because it's about people feeling confidence, feeling safe, welcome and included in a place that they want to keep returning to. And the quality of a public space is not just in its physical form, how it's maintained, designed and integrated with its environment, but also the activities that it nurtures and supports, and ensuring that everyone feels that they have access to those spaces and those opportunities. The SDGs, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, recognise that access to high quality public space is one of the key aspirations of our 21st century community, and it's critical to social, economic and environmental sustainability. The new urban agenda, which is a guiding document for achieving the SDGs, includes a commitment to promoting safe, inclusive, accessible, green and quality public spaces, including streets, sidewalks, cycling lanes, squares, waterfront areas, gardens and parks. But these are places that are multifunctional for social interaction and inclusion, for human health and well-being, economic exchange, cultural expression, amongst a wide variety of people. And so we know that delivering that aspiration at nighttime as well as in the daytime is going to be key to having a functional city for the people who live here, work here and visit here. The state government's Public Spaces Charter, its 8th principle, really focuses on safety and that people should feel safe using public space at all times of the day. And that, of course, includes pedestrian-friendly lighting, clear sight lines and signage, and activating public space at night using creative lighting design that improves visibility after dark, but also gives people a sense of engagement with and empowerment over their city. And that's one of the reasons I like that programmable artwork in that slide image just there. If we can move on to the next slide, you can see two of our city libraries. The one on the left there is the Surrey Hills Library. We've had that there for probably about 7 years or so. And the one on the right is the beautiful new Kenzo Kuma designed Darling Square Library, which was only opened in, I think, November 2019. And this is an incredible beacon, really, of a public space in a very dense foodie destination, a place I think in Sydney that reminds me the most of the cities in Asia that I love, because it is active day and night. It's a real outdoor living room, and as you can see here, creative lighting coupled with high quality architecture is, I think, fundamental to giving people those iconic attractors that are going to bring them into the city, particularly after the year we've had, when we've known that a lot of people have retreated to their areas, their suburbs or neighbourhoods, and have not returned to work in our central business district, and may feel uncertain about why they should go back if they've fallen in love with working from home. So we need to use creative lighting, creative programming, and the work that we do to attract people back into the city centre. Now, I want to speak very briefly about lighting as a brand identity in Sydney. And, light has been an essential part of Sydney's identity. Pre-pandemic, as you know, our focus was on reviving our nightlife and attracting external tourists back to the city. Light has been a foundational part of that since our Open Sydney 2012 strategy, when we began to really focus on improving urban lighting at the City of Sydney. And this was all about creating spaces where people want to hang out and feel safe to do so. If we can move on to the next slide, you can see a few public spaces. One is a park, and one is our kind of in major plaza in the middle of the city, which is called Martin Place. But doing lighting well and with sustainability in mind has been another one of our key areas of focus, because 40% of our energy consumption at the City of Sydney has related to street lighting. So we have been very focused on replacing all of our street lighting with energy efficient LEDs, and we will become the first council to replace all of our street lights in Australia with energy efficient LEDs. Since 2009, we've been working on that program with some of the major infrastructure suppliers as well. And they have since then, in replacing more than 6,500 street lights with LEDs, we've been saving $800,000 a year, and we've reduced our emissions by 2,400 tonnes. Power consumption from these lights have also reduced by over 48%. And we expect, once we complete this campaign, to see a further 47% reduction in energy consumption. So there's not just the kind of brand identity of a beautifully lit place, a place that's attractive and exciting and creative, but also one of our key goals is to create a city that is identified with sustainability and regenerative approaches to city making. And so it is a key part of our brand identity that we also are an environmentally conscious city. Lighting and doing it well plays a part in that. Of course, I also was involved in Vivid Sydney for 9 years, and Vivid Sydney is one of the key light events in the world, and I think in the country, certainly in the country, and it has become, I have to say, something that everybody asks for now. I'm constantly flooded with requests to light up like Vivid, and that's something that I think a lot more people in the community are understanding, the creative potential of creative lighting as a beacon of place, as an identifier of special events, of moments of commemoration, but also of moments potentially of solidarity in the community coming together. So if we move to this next slide, you can see a projection on the Sydney Opera House, our most iconic building. And iconic heritage buildings have been very popular to light up. It's lit beautifully just to see the architecture every day, but also during key moments like this Barugili illumination, recognising the Gadigal people, the traditional Aboriginal owners of this place, is a really important daily experience that focuses and centres First Nations knowledge in Sydney. Lighting the Opera House is about communicating a message when something major is happening in the world, and it's a way for us to send out a signal to the global community. It's also something that we do at the Sydney Town Hall. It's a less internationally known but locally distinctive sandstone icon, and one that we also light up often in synchronised with the Opera House, as we recently did to express our support for the people of Lebanon during the recent Beirut explosions. You can see on the next slide here our Museum of Contemporary Art Illuminated as part of Vivid Sydney as well. I was involved in that event from 2009 to 2017 as the director of the Ideas component, and I can see, you know, I've learned through that experience just how important lighting is in bringing people together and denoting a celebration. So to close, I want to tell you, you know, that as we focus post-pandemic on reviving our city and having that creative-led recovery that I spoke about earlier, lighting is going to play a crucial role. We have now gone out to the world with a series of public art opportunities. We're encouraging artists to work to help us reimagine and reinvent the city centre, and I'm hopeful that we'll see some really powerful creative lighting solutions as a result of that, and that they will be delivered over summer. There are a few more slides if we just want to click through them very quickly, because I know I'm over time here, but you can see there's a number of artworks that have centred around light that we've supported at the City of Sydney, and they're really crucial in creating that sense of place. They're all going to be part of this summertime city recovery program we're calling Alfresco City or Summer Streets. And funding for artists and supporting artists to activate the public domain through art is going to be central to our recovery. So thank you so much for inviting me to come and tell part of Sydney's story at Lyon Light Festival. It is so exciting to be a part of that and to share some of our work with you. Please do take a look at some of these artworks that you're seeing now, like Jason Wing's In Between Two Worlds and Nicole Forshue's beautiful Born in Darkness Before Dawn artwork. And please bring your creativity and your talent to Sydney. We would love to see your work here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess Scully, for this incredible contribution, and it's also great to see some of the artwork you are referring to. It's simply also very interesting to see how Sydney is using and acting to have creating creative-led nighttime recovery from the lockdowns the lockout laws that Jess talked about, and also the lockdown, the COVID lockdown. It's great to see perhaps how creative lighting can be such a strong resource also in the mid to long term for Sydney. And it's I'm sure we can really all imagine to be back in Sydney one day, one of these days. Sarah, you're with us this morning. We met in Durham, as was said in the chat, at the LUCI AGM 2017. And I think you had just started at the time as the director of the Illuminated River Foundation in London. And it's an honor and it's a great pleasure to have you back to learn about the insights that you've gathered since. So Sarah, you're a public space and public art expert and a curator. And previously you led the public space department at the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment, a UK governmental agency. And you also, of course, I think curated many successful art exhibitions and artworks. And you join us live from Lyon. We're really from London, of course. We're really happy to have you and to share the work about the fantastic Illuminated River Foundation and the River Project. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for letting me present. I'm actually in Somerset. That's the joys of being able to work anywhere. So this is the lovely West Country in England. So Illuminated River. Do have a look at the website because there's a huge amount of material on it, and I can't possibly talk all about it. But it's a very interesting project. I mean, the first thing is it's got the wrong name. because the last thing we're doing is illuminating the river. I mean, going back to the comment the Deputy Mayor of Lyon said, dark is important. And what we're actually doing is we're actually illuminating the bridges, but they picked the name before I joined and paid for all the corporate identity. So I couldn't change it, because in a way, what we're doing is doing what light does best, making sure that we have the right light in the right place, that it doesn't affect the different elements around it. And we have the Thames, which is comes from the ancient word Thamesis, which means dark river, and we want to keep that river dark. And in fact, it wasn't until we got our hands on it. And we're able to look at how you could use the best lighting kit with the best baffles and all the sort of things that you can do. And looking how technology could create a sustainable project. I mean, what's different, I suppose, about Illuminated River, and I can't see my presentation anymore, which is going to be a bit of a pain, Mark, is...
See that, we're putting it up.
Okay, is that... it lasts for at least 10 years. So various people were talking about light festivals. In a way, we're a new intervention into the city, and that comes with even more issues, because the lighting kit can last 20 years. We have permission for 10 years, and then we hope that it will be adopted in a way that things like the London Eye were temporary additions to the city, but then became beloved and have become permanent. But that also means, how do you create something that's around light? Using light sculpture. We're working with an artist as well as lighting designers that will enhance listed historic structures, but not dominate the city. So in a way, it's maybe slightly different to a light festival, because it's not all about da-da. It's about what can the environment cope with on a nightly basis for over 10 years, which you wouldn't get bored with it, but also it doesn't affect your senses of the rest of the city. So it's we're trying to create impact, but be subtle at the same time, which is maybe an unusual conundrum for dealing with light work. And that's because of the sort of almost permanent nature of it. Still can't see my presentation. So... So that's a bit of a problem. So we started over 4 years ago, and the first thing we did was look at what we had. And one of the things that's really struck me about the project, and what I've learned about light — I'm not a light expert at all, and it's a privilege to be amongst so many this morning — is that there's so little education about light for the general public. Color, temperature, the different types of lighting kit that you can use. What's the difference between good and bad light? I mean, a lot of people just think if something's prettily lit, then that's good. So the subtleties of learning about light. And one of the things we found was that London doesn't have a lighting strategy at all, and that there's very different approaches to light. We're also dealing with an environment where the Thames is an environment which, is our largest public space in London, but you can't get on it for free unless you fall in. So it's one of those strange places that we have turned our back on as a city. You can't even walk along it. It's not like Lyon with all those amazing walkways and the ability to be able to get a sense of the city from when you're down by the Thames. We built right up against it. I mean, it's a working city. So we've been trying over the last couple of decades in the city to sort of access the Thames again, but you can be one street away and not know where it is. So one of the aims of the project not only was to illuminate the bridges which cross it and which are the reason why London is there in the first place, these pieces of architecture and street, we wanted to reclaim them, was also to sort of guide people down, to be a sort of, as light often is, a sort of visual sort of signpost. And we were quite surprised about the statistics which I'm showing you up there, which is about this lack of access and a lack of understanding or being on the Thames. And it's also something that the poorer you are and the younger you are, the less likely you've engaged. And yet we know what light really engages with everyone, because this is a very inclusive project. It's free, it's completely publicly accessible. And one of the great things about doing something on the bridges is that there are spaces either side that you can enjoy. But if you do come to London to see Illuminated River, and I hope you will at some point, the first 4 bridges are lit, the next 5 are going to be in the spring. It's a very different feeling to experience the artwork as you go along under the bridges, because some of the bridges, the artwork is within them, underneath. Well, we're doing really well, because they were, I think, my last 2 slides. And I'd love to have the ones that I start the presentation with, because that would be great. But, oh, okay, great. So what I was talking about before about good and bad light. So London Bridge, a lot of our bridges were already lit. And you can see from this image that you get these patches and things where all the metal halides and all sorts of strange things. So this is the before and after. And oh, I do love a before and after. And London Bridge and Albert Bridge in particular were lit well over what are the legal limits. And it only took our lighting designers about 15 minutes in terms of putting on new shields around the existing light fitting to work out that they could take off most of the impact onto the river. This bit, as I said, about only having reflected light onto the river, no direct light, and keeping that Thamesis dark. So we could make immediate impacts, which we felt is, we want to be a best practice model, and all our learning is on our website as well. And when our project concludes, there will be TED Talks with different elements, different members of the team about what it takes to create something like this. I would say that, lighting projects are hard enough, aren't they? Now, if you put a working river as your site, where you've got Thames Tideway, which is the super sewer, actually going up and down all the time, and in the centre of a big city, well, I mean, the headaches are incredible. Oh, and then you add in a railway bridge. So this is Cannon Street Railway Bridge. It's 1860s. It's never been lit. As far as Network Rail are concerned, it's a piece of infrastructure. It's a workhorse that gets people into the station. But my God, it's gorgeous once you illuminate it. And so people have rediscovered actually bridges that they had kind of forgotten about. I mean, I have to say, I couldn't have named all the bridges in Central London in the right order before I started this project. And I think now that people are reconnecting with them, and they have a favourite bridge in the daytime and they have a favourite bridge at nighttime. And what Leo Villarreal, we work with a lighting artist, Leo Villarreal, a light artist, who is responsible for the Bay Lights, has done, he's almost made this one into a light box. The light isn't behind glass, but it does almost shine as it does. Now, all of it is gently kinetic. One of the biggest headaches on this project was trying to get fibre connections to all the bridges, because of course they obviously don't have them, 1865, 1868, etc. So getting the technology for a light artist who paints with his laptop was again one of the biggest challenges for this. And doing road digs during COVID was an interesting challenge as well, with all the other things. So getting everything ready so that Leo can do his magic has been in the centre of London without annoying anyone, without closing anything, on structures that we don't own, takes a lot of persuading and a lot of really good biscuits as well. And I think because this is a very joyful project, and that it's free and open to everybody, has meant that private and public sector and Network Rail have been like the biggest fans of this project, which is great. And you do have quite interesting conversations with highways engineers who apparently know an awful lot about light. And that's why we see the befores and afters of some of these, I think, just sort of explains just maybe the lack of subtlety that some of their approaches can have. For us, it's not about putting light on a structure and hoping it kind of works. It's about putting the elements within the structure to reveal the architecture. And one of the things we were very careful of, and actually I have to say I have not seen this on our other bridges, even in Lyon, is to hide the kit as much as humanly possible. You don't want to see the lighting kit in the daytime. We don't want to see the lighting kit in the nighttime. We just want to see the lighting effect. And when you're dealing with structures like this, we don't want that visibility. Again, these are grade 2 listed structures, most of them. We don't want to have cables and wires and ugly boxes sticking out on the side of them. So there was an awful lot of effort about how do you hide everything that you need to make this kind of effect. Now, Millennium Bridge was really interesting. It was the most difficult bridge to do because it was, even though it was the newest bridge, because it's been designed as an artwork by Norman Foster, it was very difficult to retrofit. And I think that's one of the challenges we have learned. A lot of things aren't designed to be able to accommodate, the levels of cabling and things that you might need if you want to add light. And not our pedestrian walkways, we kept as a white light, and this has a beautiful white pulse, because what Foster wanted originally when he designed this was to make it a blade of light, but it didn't come off. So what Leo's managed to do is actually create that for him. And because in the first phase the bridges are so close together, you get to see this kind of sort of joining up of them. And while there isn't any physical kind of coordination between them in terms of they don't sort of spin off each other in terms of their sort of software programs, they are in sympathy. And once all the kit is on and we've done all the pre-programming, Leo goes and sits down by the bridges and programs them. And the idea is that over at least the 10 million years of its lifespan, Leo will come back as the light environment changes in London and reprogram it. You know, maybe it needs tweaking. We certainly found with Millennium we were a bit too subtle, and afterwards we had to turn it up a little bit just because it wasn't making enough impact. So I think it's really important to future-proof the light projects that you do, and so because the environment will change. And the colours are warmer and hotter where there's more nighttime activity, and in the later phase, there's more sort of whites and ambers in more residential and less of a sort of cultural hotspot. So, you know, in the centre of London, you think that you'd know everything that was going on. Well, there wasn't any bat and bird surveys because, of course, the first people that had to go at us, as I'm sure happens to all of you, were the bat people, and then they were closely followed by the bird people and then the fish people. And then when everybody realised that actually what we were doing was actually better for the bats and the birds and the fishes, and bats are very sensible creatures and don't fly down rivers anyway because it's not a great place to be. And we used all that data to create a new research material about central London. It didn't exist around the Thames, and nor did luminance studies. And so our team went out and surveyed all the bridges and all the buildings around the Thames, and it turned out that most of the buildings were pumping out far more light than the bridges were. And this, you can see here, is Sea Container's house, which is the bane of most people who like light in London's lives in the way that it's done. But what we found as I was going on about the lack of education is that there aren't any villains in this piece. People are proud of their buildings, but the problem is that what we see in London at night is what facilities managers want us to see. There's no curation of the light in London. So historic buildings disappear because they're elegantly and subtly lit, and then hotels, even PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a great big commercial company, looks like a sort of, a cinema at night, the place you might want to go, because they all compete against each other and use the river as the backdrop. So the river suffers. But when you take this illuminance study around and say, look, fish do not like having sex with the lights on, which is our main argument when we say you should get rid of your light because there's 135 species of fish in the river. They're like, oh, we're really sorry, we should do something about it. So one of the things that's come out of this project is that we are sponsoring a much bigger piece of work, which LUCI are involved in as well, with Centre for London, to look at sort of lighting policies, lighting education in the city, and what we can do to share learning and best practice. Because I can't personally go around and knock on every single door and say, look, you've been a very, very naughty boy. So we need to have sort of a better understanding of what we talked about before, when it should be light and dark. I mean, and we need that dark. And as I said, we know where all the birds are breeding, and we've done, I think, the second in the country interactive online environmental impact assessment. Because I think that is one of the issues that people always accuse light of. In fact, we've had 7 babies, which are Egyptian geese as a result of this project, and they've had their own goose cam. So in fact, our project has done more to support wildlife than a lot of others. So as I say, we've done a huge amount of work. And one of the other things that's really interesting is that, I have a lot of very clever people who know a lot about light who are always telling me about kilowatts and things, and when people say, how much energy are you using? Because, if we want to be the most environmentally friendly lighting light artwork that we can, and we are. We're using a brilliant kit from Signify. We're using green energy suppliers as well. But at the end of the day, we are going to be using some electricity. And if we're really environmentally friendly, we'll just turn off all the lights. But then that would be really sad, especially now, because I think what we found with our project is for health and well-being, light has played a really important role during COVID. But it goes back to kilowatts. Nobody I know outside the lighting sector know what a kilowatt is. But if you say it's the equivalent of 3 kettles a night, or 3 kilowatts is 3 hairdryers a night, or Cannon Street uses the equivalent of 3 washing machines a night, it's the sort of thing that people can commute. And they're a bit like, oh, that's not too bad. And I think it's about communicating the technical side of what we're achieving and what we're learning in a way that makes sense. The other thing was that all the lights on the bridges that were there before, and there were quite a lot, stayed on from dusk till dawn. And that was set in the 1970s by the different bridge owners, you know, that great age of environmental awareness. So we said, well, why don't we turn them off at 2? Everyone in London talks about the city being a 24-hour city. I've been out there at 4 o'clock in the morning, so it's dead as a dodo. Well, it's dead as a dodo. All the time now, but we're not really a 24-hour city. There aren't that many people around at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we said, why don't we just turn it off at 2 and have that precious dark time? So it's about having that relationship and that sort of agreement almost with night to say, this is your time and this is our time. We're not trying to replicate daytime at nighttime. We're trying to create a different environment in terms of something that is works with the dark, and then we have the super dark. I think the other thing is about learning. So these are recent graduates. That's Leo standing up. Recent graduates on the far side from the lighting professionals, from the Institute of Lighting Professionals. So we've worked really closely with the lighting sector so that Leo explains the project, but then they also spend time with him at night and do some sort of on-site work with him, supporting him. And I think that making sure that the next generation learn from what we're doing is really important, and sharing that. So we have reached out to the sector very much in our city, and they've been incredibly supportive as well. And it's great to see how much new talent there is emerging, and they were delighted to be involved in this, because I think light art is something that is really going to be developing a lot more. And so I think lighting professionals are going to be so much more involved in that aspect of illumination. Next slide, please. I think the other thing that's really important is what the effect, the perception that light can have. So we do perception audits on all our bridges. We take people to see them before we've illuminated them with whatever lighting kit they already have on them, and some of them have it and some of them don't. And then we take the same group back after we've done our installations. I'm pleased to report that all of them preferred it. But we also found perception audit is also about, how do you feel at a place? Does it make you feel happy? Do you feel safe? What do you think of the quality of the public realm? Now, we haven't altered the quality of the public realm around many of these bridges. We've put in a few bits of public seating, because there's no point in creating a lights artwork where there's nowhere for you to be able to sit and enjoy it for free, because we have a lot of commercialization in terms of cafes, and I want anyone to be able to enjoy this. But what we were really surprised was that everyone felt safer. They also felt that the quality of the public realm had improved, even though we hadn't done anything. But that's what the sort of psychological impacts of light, well, we all know, I'm sorry, I'm talking to the converted, I'm usually talking to a much broader audience, is that impact. And so we could record that, and that went up considerably. So, you know, they're really interesting sort of psychological impacts of what we can do. And as I said, there's me on a bench, because you need to be able to sit and enjoy it. Our dwell time, we've been looking at that. So if you go to the Mona Lisa in Paris, you get 20 seconds is the average dwell time. We're getting 20 minutes because it's that wonderful moment where you can pause, because you can stop across a bridge and wait, and because we're putting in more seating and working with the local authorities as well to provide other facilities. There's plenty of space for you just to have that moment. And then we're finding people are spending quite a long time, because the artwork's very subtle, it moves very, very slowly, that you kind of stay, because out of your corner of your eye, you're not sure it's moving, and then you realize it actually is. And I think we are curating this kind of experience around the bridges, which seems to be going down very well, and obviously doing walking tours and all sorts of things to support that. And these are the walking tours. These have been sold out. We also did free walking tours, and then we made sure that they were commercially viable. We have done an audio descriptive guide because, of course, we have created an artwork that many people with sight loss can enjoy. It's moving, it has colour, and I think that's the biggest project that's ever been done in Britain for people with sight loss. We do free boat tours for community groups as well. We're hoping to do yoga, all sorts of things post-COVID, where the artwork and the public realm work together to create an environment for other activities. We have night kayaking, night mudlarking. Basically, all the activities that were going on along the Thames now just have night in front of them, night joggers. And Illuminated River, because of this perception of feeling safer and the quality of the public realm has improved, people are drawn there, like moths would be, to have activities. And of course, it is the perfect COVID project because you can gather and you can move in big spaces. We've got the fresh air of the river and the health and well-being. So we're doing health and well-being walks as well. And our most recent ones have been for the key workers at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. We thought they might be a bit exhausted after everything that they're doing. And so we do free walking tours for them as well. And they've all been completely booked up. So people respond, I think, to engagement in it. And they're fascinated by the process of how was this made and what is the artist responding to. And then they want to know about the history of the bridges. So this idea about reconnecting them with the architecture and the history of their city has been phenomenal. Next, please. I think I probably should stop now.
I was going to jump in here also to say that, we should perhaps go through the next slides a bit faster, but that's fine. It's such a great project. We have a lot of questions also here from the audience. So we have a Q&A at the end of the session, but we're scooping up the questions.
And these are our boat tours, because I say, because a lot of it's embedded within the bridges, the most experience is on a boat, as you would in Amsterdam with their lovely kind of light festival. We commission new music for the bridges. I mean, in Britain we had a Handel's Water Music, which is over 200 years old, and we thought, well, why don't we create our own music to go with the bridges and the light sculpture? So we work with Guildhall School Music. So each bridge now has a soundtrack of 4 or 5 different compositions, which you can download for free, so that when you're walking along as well, you can have a more immersive experience and really feel like you're not in the city anymore. So it's about how you get the visual. Using light sculpture to work with sound as well, and that's been really, really successful. And again, a legacy part of the project. Next slide. Very, very fast. I must be fast. I think I'm nearly at the end anyway. And so we'll just go through these. So this is Blackfriars, obviously. Well, you can see it. So this is one of the next ones. Next, please. Waterloo, really difficult bridge. We realised that our original design, if we'd attached it to the thin Portland stone facade, would have actually probably made part of it fall off. And we're actually here to make the bridges look nicer rather than destroy them. So you have to understand what your bridge can take. So now we're using a colour core along the side of it and illuminating the underneath of Waterloo, which will be spectacular because you can get under that bridge so easily, especially on the south bank. Golden Jubilee are the 2 footbridges each side of Hungerford Bridge, and so like Millennium, they will be white, so that the pedestrian accesses are always gently twinkling white. These don't do them justice. This is going to be so gorgeous, and we're really lucky that UNESCO have endorsed this project because they think this will be an enhancement to the environments of the World Heritage Site. We're working with 2 World Heritage Sites. Hey, why have one when you can have 2? Because the other one is Tower of London. And Tower Bridges are terribly lit at the moment and has no sympathy with that. So this is 1862, the oldest bridge on the river, and this is about putting tiny little lights in that wonderful waffle effect underneath. And it's green because it's as you all know, the House of Commons seats, and then there'll be this just gently moving light along that kind of ridge. So it's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And then Lambeth will be our final bridge, which is red because of the House of Lords seats. So we have to test everything. We have planning permission, 30 planning, 30 listing building consents we had to do, and planning permissions. We did more in Britain, in London. Well, the only other people that have done as many as us have been Crossrail and Tideway, and they had acts of Parliament. So 7 local authorities that we work with, 5 bridge owners. So it's complex. And Paris, someone from Paris came to see me in the early days and said, "Would tell me how to do this project?" And I said, don't do this project. It's far too complicated. And then I explained, and she said, "Well, we only have one planning department, and our office is next door to the mayor's." I was like, "It's going to be fine." And why do it? 90 million people will see it every year in a normal year, just going about their normal business. That's not anyone coming to see Illuminated River. That's just the kind of scale. That's why what we do in cities is so important and so transformative. I think that's the end. And then there is a video, and obviously I'll answer questions.
Yes, wonderful.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's really incredible. I think we'll see the video of Illuminated River. Perhaps it's been put in the chat here, so anyone can have a first look at this incredible project. And I think, you've illustrated so well how London, this great metropolis, is reimagining this Mother River Thames nightscape, and really bringing to life this incredible light masterpiece. So I think it really speaks to the Londoners, but also to the world. So thank you very much, Sarah. Now, I want to perhaps, go to the question and answer session. And I'd like, of course, to say a huge thank you to Sylvain Godinot for his presentation. He just said that he said, I think it was fantastic to hear about also the illuminations of the Sydney Opera House, as we said. But perhaps for this question and answer session, we did find some questions from you in the chat, especially for Sarah on the Illuminated River project. So that's perfect. Sarah, we have a few questions for you here. Perhaps you also had time to see them in the chat, but even if this is not the case, what I wanted to do is perhaps read them here for you, and perhaps you can answer. We have some questions regarding how are designers and artists selected. How were the designers and artists, and perhaps also the other partners selected for the project, and are all the fixtures and installations owned and maintained by the city?
In answer to the first question, there was an international competition. And they had over 106 entries. So they were looking for a multidisciplinary team that included a light lead. It didn't have to be a light artist. It could be a lighting designer of any description, with an architect because of the structures, and then all the different sort of team needed to support that. So that was won by Leo Villarreal, who's the American light artist, working with Lifshitz, Davison, Sanderlands, who are British architects who are responsible for, well, actually they designed one of the bridges, so that was helpful. So they knew about bridges, they designed Golden Jubilee, and had a lot of experience working with light in London. So that's how that happened. And when I joined, they were still selecting the winner. So I had no idea who I was going to be professionally married to for years. And luckily, it's a really great team. So, and on the second thing is, the reason why we managed to persuade 5 different bridge owners to let us have their bridges, basically, was that we are paying for the maintenance on anything that's costing them, certainly for the City of London, because they own 4 of them. And there are Network Rail, TfL, so these are public bodies who can't afford anything like that, and Westminster Council at the moment, is that we pay for the maintenance and all the lighting kit, so they get free lighting kit. So it was a bit like, would you mind us coming and working on your bridges and giving you £500,000 worth of free lighting kit? I won't pay for the installation as well. And they were a bit like, oh, let me think about that for a minute. So I think that was partly why it went well in terms of that relationship, is that they know that we have put that money aside for 10 years, and we have the team in place and maintenance contracts for all those bridges. The only ones we're not doing that, we're still paying for the lighting kit, but we're not paying for the maintenance, is the City of London, because we made huge savings for them financially in terms of of what they would be spending on just even electricity. So their costs are less by using Illuminated River. So it's a win-win for them.
Perfect. Wonderful. We have some questions about specifically biodiversity, which is a topic that you reached upon many times. And, you talked about some biodiversity studies in the project, also regarding fish, bats, birds, etc. But perhaps one of the questions was it necessary, compulsory to do surveys in advance on protection of species before starting the whole project?
Yeah, we had to do surveys of every kind. We had to find out condition of the bridges. We had to find out, yes, what was roosting and foraging on any of the bridges. So all of that was done beforehand, and we have to still do them every 2 years during the lifespan of the project to make sure that those conditions haven't changed and that there are different species there.
Right.
But we've worked very closely with the Zoological Society of London and the Bat Society, and so we've got people monitoring that as well who let us know. But yeah, we have that's part of the conditions of planning. We had to do a pre-survey, which was the environmental impact assessment, and then during the duration of it, double check what the impact has been, which at the moment is nothing. The planners seem to think they're covered in bats just because some of them look a bit gothic. It's not the case actually, and a lot of them are really brightly lit anyway. Right. So if it would be a very strange place for any bird or bat to roost.
Some questions about more focused perhaps on people. How are the visitors of the bridges perceiving the new lighting thus far? Do you have some insight in there? What active steps do you take to shape user experience on a continuous basis and engage with users?
Okay, well, the first one is something on Twitter is like 98% positive response. Obviously, as we said, we have an engagement program. Right. We do these walks and tours and activities, art classes, all sorts of things. So we've come up with a whole sort of range of things we feel the project's designed for Londoners. If tourists enjoy it, that's great, but it's primarily for Londoners, and it's partly about getting Londoners to reconnect with their cities and also local communities. There are communities on some of the social housing estates 2 streets back from the river whose sort of grandparents used to be lightermen or watermen, and yet they have no relationship with the Thames or the bridges. So it's teaching Londoners about their own history. So we do an awful lot of engagement, and we on social media an awful lot as well. And as I say, lots of talks and walks. We've a program that will continue for the life of the project. And in terms of user experiences, we used a Signify app to try and work out where people were gathering and to look at the quality of those spaces, because there are certain angles that you get a better view. I showed one where you see these different bridges all lined up. So we are monitoring, and that's been slightly curtailed by COVID and the restrictions of whether people are now gathering in different places to enjoy Illuminated River, because that has an impact on safety, accessibility, etc. So that we want to be able to look at that because I think it gives you a different take on where you might want to be and enjoy. But yeah, we have a full. Maybe I didn't explain that enough. We, in terms of the user experience, it's something you can do on your own. I think it's actually better on your own. And there's but we have provided ways of engaging, whether it's boats or tours or head kit, walking maps, all sorts of things. So there is that gamut of stuff to allow the user to experience it. And it just doesn't look great on, it looks all right, but light, as I think we showed in that previous presentation, it's hard to photograph. So you do have to be there. We've done a Google 360 exhibition, so people can look at it remotely from all over the world. But I think the user experience is maybe different than if you're in a gallery. The experience is to just go down and enjoy it.
Yeah, which something we will hopefully do at some point for sure in London, perhaps even with many other people. I had a last question for Sarah. How has the project influenced perhaps lighting in London as a whole?
Well, I see there's a question on the chat about when they go off, and I did say in my presentation it was 2:00 in the morning, but it's made people think about their own lighting, as I was explaining, because in a way we've become the new quite by accident the new lighting czars of London. You know, I mean, once you realise the impact of light, and once you see good and bad light, you can't stop seeing it. And it's really interesting that community groups come to us about problems that they've got. There's nothing related to Illuminated River. They might want to do a lighting trail, but also that they've got too much light from commercial buildings. That's one of the biggest problems. I mean, you can read in your bed at night from the lights of the offices where there's nobody, you know, at night. So people have come to us for advice about their own lighting issues. So community groups, for example, the vast majority of them are telling us that sort of 2/3 of their sort of complaints to their local authorities about light. It's about too much light from commercial buildings, or, you know, inconsiderate light, or in the outer boroughs, not enough in their public realm, that lighting isn't good enough. So that's been quite odd. And that's why we decided to set up this Centre for London, much wider, higher level strategic piece to look at the city. There's only one local authority in London with a public lighting strategy, and that's the City of London. And so I suppose by being an honest broker, not being in any particular camp, and also being a mayoral project, we do have a night czar. She didn't want to be called the nightmare, so she's called the night czar. And she's taken light on. I mean, it was mainly about sort of activity in terms of sort of nightlife, but she's taken light on as part of, I think, as a direct result of understanding what we've learned from this project. So it has much wider repercussions. I mean, we are disseminating all the data we know about why people don't go out at night, and working with other research groups. So at the LSE, they have a program called Conjoining Light. So in a way, I think of us as a catalyst, and maybe a way of communicating some of the things that we've learned from all the experts into the wider public realm, and getting out to communities and articulating the role of light, the power of it, and how to use it with, I think, with some sensitivity as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I think that was a great question to wrap up, also from creative lighting to how it has an impact on a whole city. So thank you very much again for your contribution and your answers to all the questions. Thank you so much. We're wrapping up this session with quite some delay, so sorry about this, but I think it was immensely interesting to have those three approaches, those 3 points of view, and we'll certainly put those speakers again back together so they can exchange also in the real life conference or forum. Thank you so much to all our fantastic speakers and contributors. I think, yes, creative lighting can be a fantastic link between economy, ecology, and culture. As Jess said in one of the parts of the video she shared, it needs all of our energy and creativity to get this message, I think, out to all our decision makers. And yeah, I hope that everyone on board here can help us in this mission.